Hi, everyone. Welcome. I'm so excited to introduce to you my guest for today. Jenny Dalton is an author, facilitator, coach, and healer. Her work in the world flows from facilitating healthier local food systems and fundraising for an orphanage in Haiti to talking about her recently published book, Of Butterflies and Bullies, a Judy Blume-inspired story about her experience being bullied in fifth grade. She also runs the Better Friends Club, which is a space for grown women to heal from their childhood bullying, alongside facilitating school assemblies to empower young girls. Hi, Jen. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thanks, Sarah. Thanks so much for having me.
So let's kick this off with you telling us a little bit about your story of how you got to doing the work that you do today.
Sure. So, I guess we could start with I was bullied in fifth grade, and that experience, as I'm sure some of your listeners who were bullied too, and even bullies, we carry around with us a lot of shame from those experiences. And we start to tell ourselves certain things about who we are, like, I'm not good enough, or, they don't like me, or, the things I do aren't likable out there. Right. So I spent a long time dealing with that. But along the way, I was always a writer and always an artist. I felt always kind of someone who was generating things and putting them out there and dealing with the feelings that I had about the things I was creating, right? As a lot of creators do. And I had this idea that I would write a story about my experience being bullied. Of course, a lot of your listeners I might dating myself or whatever, but I read all of Judy Blume's books when I was growing up. But she really inspired me to just tell the truth about my experience. And as a girl having this experience, I definitely felt like I was the only one that had ever happened to, right? Definitely felt a lot of shame about sharing that this is something that had happened to me with my friends that I had as an adult. But I decided to embark on a novel writing process for it that turned into essentially self-healing and self-exploration and just kind of self-therapy. It took me 10 years to write the story.
Wow.
I was living in San Francisco at the time, and it was just like a combination of like a lot of writing groups, a lot of workshopping, a lot of like meeting friends in cafes and saying, let's work together for an hour. And a lot of getting clarity around like, well, what is it to write a novel, right? Like there's just so much craft involved, and reading lots of other like young adult books. And that was 20 years ago that I wrote this story. And I got it to a place where I had an agent in New York City. And I remember the moment I went and met my agent, and I flew out to New York from San Francisco, and I bought like this rad suit somewhere in the meatpacking district before it was actually what it's like now. And I was wearing heels, and I was having my Carrie Bradshaw moment, like running off to meet my agent. And she just had a hard time selling it because it doesn't fit into any genre necessarily. It's coming of age, but it's also a book that adult women can read. And it's a book that young people can read. And at the time, we just didn't have like YA. It wasn't, young adult books just weren't what they are now, which are books that grown people read. And so we had this whole process, and I then like sat down one moment and I just kind of read it myself, and we laughed and I cried, and I was like, I really feel proud of this. And it's okay if it doesn't happen. If my dreams of like being the next Judy Blume don't blossom, it's okay. Like I did this thing, I got so much out of it, and I learned so much about myself. And then I just kind of put it in a drawer, and it sat around for 20 years. And I recently got married. My husband said to me, he's like, so you said you wrote a book? Like, what is this? And in between then and now, I've done so much. I mean, I've been a copywriter. I've worked in politics. I've worked, right now, my day job is I work in food systems and do a lot of facilitation and writing around local food system development. And I was like, okay, I guess I'll let you read my story, and I handed it to him, and he's super well read. And he said, this is really good. You want to do something with it? And so I decided to self-publish it. And since that moment, it's like embarking on this whole other birthing process around what intentionally am I doing with this thing? Right. Like I'm engaging now in a conversation of being bullied, like what was that? And then it's opened up all these doors around having conversations with grown women about their experiences, which is what led to the Better Friends Club. Because there's no space for grown women to have conversations about what happened to them. Like we don't talk about that in our grown-up relationships with each other, yet we're still carrying all these things with us, right? So I don't know. I just love this kind of iterative process of like, well, it started off as this, and then it sat around, and then it happened to this, and then just like allowing our little projects to have lives of their own and not necessarily steering them in any direction. Now, of course, I still want Judy Blume-esque, kind of like attention on the book would be really great. And if it happens, great. If it doesn't, that's totally cool too. Like I'm having fun along the way, which is really all I care about.
I love it. And I love how it's, like it sat in your drawer for 20 years and now it's coming back and it's sparking this conversation again, which is a really important conversation, right? And when you reached out to me, it was the first time it's not the first time I reflected on how bullying had affected my own life, because I've been in therapy for a long time. I'm doing a lot of inner work. And I know, as a individual and as a coach, that in order to get where we want to go, we have to undo the triggers from the old hurts, right? Because those are the things that are keeping us stuck in a loop, in feelings of unworthiness, undeservingness, all of those beliefs that we created when we just didn't have the adult tools to emotionally understand a challenging situation. And so there's been a couple things that have come up for me. Like and then what came up for me was like, was I bullied? I was like, well, I was bullied. I feel like everybody's bullied in school because kids are just mean to each other. But I was like, am I minimizing it? Like, was it that bad or am I minimizing it? And I think it's so important, as adults to have compassion for our younger selves. And I know some people have it, genuinely, it's really, really bad. And there's no question. And I know, I hear that it's getting worse too with, social media coming into the lives of young people. So, and plus I know suicide rates have gone up since the pandemic. And so it's a really important conversation. And I would love to hear about like what your journey with that process of reliving things that had happened to you in the past, like what inspired you to go there, that kind of led to you wanting to write a book about it.
Yeah, I mean, I think part of it was this new relationship I have with my husband was a big piece of it, because one of the things that he kept mentioning to me was, you're so defensive all the time. Like, why are you get so defensive when just like the littlest things happen? And I'm like, oh, where's that coming from? Like, of course I don't want to be causing, like uncomfortable things in our relationship. But I had to like really think about that. And I remember it was like 3 or 4 years ago that he mentioned it. And I'm like, this is another part of that wound from being bullied, where I'm like, who did I become after that? Like I became like someone who, I minimized my own self, my own true nature, so that I could fit in with like the cool girls, which I still, to this day, I mean, I'm still like, do I have the cutest jeans? Like we're in that zone. Like even I could say, I don't care, right? I've got this whole rebel side of me that's like, screw this. Like I'm not interested but I really want to fit in. And when I get triggered, I get really defensive, or, like it's fight or flight, right? We either want to fight with somebody or we want to like go hide away. And I definitely also hide away a lot too. But, as we get older, even though I spent like what I say is like 10 years of writing the story plus therapy, plus like I had a conversation with one of my girlfriends back when I was like in my mid 30s. She invited me to be in her wedding. And I was like, oh, I don't know. I'm scared to be in your wedding, because the last time I was in somebody's wedding, she wasn't happy with my performance as a bridesmaid. Apparently I didn't do a good enough job. And we're not friends anymore. And I really want us to continue this friendship. So we end up having this whole conversation about it. I mean, she's like one of my closest friends now. And I think it's because we like broke that through. But every decade, it feels like I'm just peeling away another layer of that wound, and getting at something else. I think that was triggered by the experience of like at such a young age, which I mean, 10, 11, however old I was. I just had a conversation this morning with someone who experienced it in first grade, and she's still carrying around that wound. So I think we're slowly like kind of like unraveling who and balancing like what we experienced with who we're becoming along the way. And it was a defining moment for me, and for a lot of women who were just bystanders in, or they felt like maybe they were just bullied a little bit, or maybe they were the bully. It's all interwoven. We all have something, right? Because we're girls, and we live in this unique girl culture that breeds this kind of behavior.
Yeah, and I think like that's such an important thing to acknowledge and to be talking about. I remember I had a moment of real realization about that when I was making a found footage film from old films from France in the 60s. And I was doing like collaging with them. And I was just, intuitively drawn to certain images. And I noticed a theme that was coming across in films, which was women being pitted against each other and women fighting. And just really connected with me and reminded me how that is a conversation that is right now evolving. And, in having these conversations, we are evolving this conversation and recognizing how women have been pitted against each other, and, this deeply entrenched misogyny, and, like systematic oppression of women affects women by turning them against each other, causing us to disrespect ourselves, to internalize conversations that we're not worthy and deserving enough, or that, our opinions and values don't fit into the status quo. So they must not be good enough. They must not be important enough. And, in that conversation, then we turn against each other and we judge each other. So we're only ever judging ourselves as much as we're judging, if we find ourselves judging each other, we're doing that to ourselves first, right? And so it's in recognizing where we've been hurt and having the strength and the courage to go there, and then to bring these conversations, first to ourselves, then to our relationships. It can be really painful. It can be really uncomfortable, but ultimately that's the only path to loving each other and having so much more freedom and being able to celebrate who we are and support each other, right?
Absolutely. I love the way you express that. It's just so right on. I mean, we're taught by the media, especially like, people encounter, I think young people now encounter over 30,000 images and messages a day. And it's so ingrained, right? Exactly everything you just described. And I even just the other day was trying to make a playlist about songs about friendship that felt like really good and happy and like positive about like girl friendships. It is so hard to find. Like there are so few of them because they're all about like what you just described, like competition, or they're about, oh, you're going to steal my man, so you're not my friend anymore, which is essentially competition, but just none of those like really positive things about the, the beautiful, like yummy feelings of having a good friend that you can lean on. And I was listening to some women talk who are part of this KIND campaign that I just joined, which goes into schools to do these assemblies. And they were saying, it's so funny. It's so easy for us to like break up with guys. Like we'll break up with guys when they don't treat us well. And then, to whatever relationship you're in. Right. But we never break up with like our friends. Why don't we do that? And I've definitely done it. I've done it twice, and it's very uncomfortable. But what we're talking about here is just being real, right? And being honest with each other. And that's where it starts. And one of the things I really like about the KIND campaign is that they do something called like the apology letter. And you essentially are encouraging girls to write apologies to each other that are sincere and start that conversation of like, I'm really sorry. And that's where the realness starts to emerge, I think, is when we can just acknowledge that pain and just be, and like for me, one of my highest values is being real. And sometimes it's not easy. The truth hurts. But it's the path, I think, to truly loving our lives at a really deep level and loving each other. So just like you said.
Yeah, I love it. And yeah, you're right. I think I've been talking about this a lot lately too, is the responsibility of the media. And, particularly with everything that's come up lately with the interview Oprah did with Meghan and Harry, and her shining a light again on the toxicity of the British tabloids. And that was a really a memorable moment for me after I left England, and I had been living in North America for a while. And it was when I discovered the documentary about Madonna, and it just blew my mind. And I was like, she's an incredible person and an incredible artist. Why did I was like checking in with myself. I was like, why did I think she was dumb? Like, why did I think she was not worth looking at? Like, what part of me, where did that come from? And then I realized that, because she'd been living in London, the press have just been destroying her and calling her an old fishwife and, blaming her for the failure of her marriage with, the director that she was with. I can't remember his name. And it's the same story over and over again. Any type of successful woman, particularly artists, any women in the public eye who are succeeding, who are successful, they become a target. And there's so much toxicity around them in the press, and it's prevalent. And I never saw it because I was in it. I just, it was just there in the background. And how is that affecting every single woman in the UK when that is going on, And then there was another, this is bullying on a larger scale, right? There was another woman, Caroline Flack, who was a big UK celebrity. She became a target of the tabloids, something to do with her relationship, all of these toxic accusations against her, and she ended up committing suicide. So it's like, that's the extent of the bullying that's going on within the media. Of course, that's going to filter down into, the lives of the people. And it's shocking, really, when we look at it. Like, it's upsetting, isn't it?
It totally is. And I just want to, I want to talk about the media. I think that it's just such a, something that, just taking media breaks is like so important, just taking a break from social media, taking a break from reading papers, getting yourself into a mindset of like, this is not necessarily reality, right? And just really like getting clarity on that, which I know for me, it took me, I think I was like in my mid-20s when I was like, you know what? I think I'm just someone who doesn't need to read the news and read these things. Like, I haven't read People magazine or Us Weekly or anything like that in years and years and years. And I also have a no gossip policy that I've had since high school, when one of my good guy friends pulled me aside and was like, Jenny, this gossiping you're doing, it's ruining you. You have to stop. And I was like, oh my God, thank you so much for saying something, because I want to be liked. And if being a gossip is not the way to get there, then I will change my ways, And I just haven't gossiped since then. I tell my friends, I'm like, I am Fort Knox, but we live in this world where it's like, oh, well, that's how we're talking. And it's like, well, do you want to be someone who talks about other people, or do you want to be someone who talks about ideas? And I think we're so many strong, like brilliant, creative women. And if we stop talking about each other and start talking about the ideas that are brewing inside of us, for our philosophies and the way that we want to live life, like that's creating a world we want to live in, right? And our words create our worlds. They just do. And so we need to be intentional and powerful with those words. But I want to say something about Madonna, because I love her. But I grew up with her. So for me, she was always like, I dressed up as her for Halloween one year. But her whole thing is about reinvention, and she's constantly reinventing herself. That's like she's not afraid to say, well, I was this over here at this point in time, and now I'm going to be this. And now I'm going to be this. And right now she's got this whole like Madam X thing that she's doing, which I just can't understand at all. But I respect her for her creative, power. She's just like, no, she's like in her 60s, and she's just going for it. She's very inspiring. So
yeah, she's amazing. And, that's why we have to celebrate authors like you who are self-publishing, and, podcasts like this, where, we're elevating and raising empowering conversations around women. And I did the same thing. Like, I just cut out all media forms that weren't in alignment with the vision of the world that I wanted to be creating. And there's this judgment around, oh, you need to be informed, or like blah, blah, blah. And, we're taught at school, you need to read the papers and know everything that's going on. And I'm like, what about everything that's not in the papers? What about everything that's related to my community, my values, and, the people and the conversations that are affecting my life and the people that I care most about? Like, that's my news, I'm in that conversation all the time. And I do actually really enjoy the late shows on YouTube that will do the headlines in like a very palatable, humorous way without any of the negativity and the toxicity. But I think it's so important, particularly with social media, which I don't know if you saw the film on Netflix, The Social Dilemma, about how it's literally the software and the programming is designed like a slot machine to keep you addicted to the content, and they tailor all the content towards, things that you like and have a preference for. So it's really like rebuilding our own worldview. So, with that knowledge in mind, yes, it's so important to take social media breaks. I think this is the next conversation, very similar to food in terms of detoxifying. Like if we don't, there's such a thing as junk media, in my opinion, and it's the same as eating burgers all day. If you're consuming toxic information that, creates a lot of internal challenge and battles, to just start drowning that out, and then really, voting with our attention and giving it to the media creators who are elevating conversations that we really care about. So I love that we're talking about this. I also love that we're talking about Madonna.
Well, I love what you're saying. The revolution starts within, right? It starts in your own head. The space where we have the most control is our own thoughts. And so to be really careful about what you're saying, like, what are you consuming? What are you allowing into your mental space? That's like your first line of defense, and against a toxic world, right? And towards creating the world that we want to create. And what's cool about social media is that you can curate your who you are subscribing to, who you're following, and then you can unfollow them if you don't like what you're seeing or it's not feeling good inside of you. But there's also like a real opportunity for us all to become more embodied about the way that we feel when we're consuming the media. And it's like, if it doesn't feel good, just like if you don't have something nice to say, don't say anything at all. If it's not feeling good that you're like reading about like another, tragedy or some other federal or worldwide thing that you can't control, focus on the things that you can, because that's what's feeding a healthier you. And then when you're healthy, then you can be out there being a healthy friend, a healthy, lover, a healthy brother, sister, daughter, coworker, etc.
Yeah. And another like very real part of this, consumption is, and I saw this shift for me when I made the decision to make social media a tool for my business and for the impact that I wanted to make. And I chose to step into being a creator more than I was a consumer. It's like my happiness shifted, my health shifted. I was very clear about the intentions behind why I was using these tools, and I stopped consuming so much. And this conversation comes up all the time for my clients when they're feeling, especially when you're in the early stages of creating something, and it's really about building that self-trust and listening to yourself. Anytime we're consuming, other people's work or similar ideas, there's a lot of noise, and it's an internal battle that goes on. So, use the tools to our advantage and stop comparing yourself to people. Like, stop following people that are doing similar work to you. Only follow people that are inspiring you in an intentional way that, like you say, makes you feel really good. And then the other part of this tool, which we get to use for our advantage, which I'm always encouraging my clients to use as they step out in, sharing their message publicly for their coaching work or their artistic work, is create safe spaces on the internet for you to only speak to the people that you're speaking to. Block the people who you are concerned may disagree with you or jump on you or attack you, or, better than that, just internally make the decision that you're not available for that. But we do have that control of, we don't have to engage. We don't have to prove ourselves to anybody, and to really be very intentional with our focus and our energy with getting the message to the people that will benefit from it, because those are the conversations that bring so much joy, so much expansion, real genuine transformation and impact. And to be using the tools in an empowered way, and to not give our power away to it.
Yeah. And I love what you're saying. This distinction for us all to remember about creating or consuming. And it's the same thing about like being generative or being like super passive about things. And it's like, do you want to be like creating the world that you want to see, or do you want to be at the effect of a world that's just out there that someone else is defining for you? And yeah, I love that you give that advice. And it's the key, I think, to peace. And yeah, and creating space in your own world for your world, you know, that you're wanting to create to emerge. And yeah, and like I'm struggling right now with like you know, putting my story out there, only because I have been comparing myself to other people who have been doing it, because I'm like, well, how do you do this? You know, and so I have to look and see how other people are doing it. And then I'm like, oh, I'm scared to do that. And you just have to go out and do it and trust that, you know, when you're being authentic and you're really following your heart and you're allowing your true essence to emerge from your stories, that it's what's meant to be, because it just keeps coming back at you. And I'm getting such like, I'm loving having the conversations that I'm having. And for me, again, that's like what's fun. And fun is another huge value in my life, being fun and being real. And for me, that's like a worthwhile day, you know, and it's like putting good vibes out there into the world.
I love it. And I love how you're such a perfect example of everything that I talk about, which is your story is your gold. Like, it's all you need, right? Your story, everything that you've been through, all of the experience that you've embodied, all of the conversations that you're able to have because of where you are and everything that you've been through. That's all you need. Like, all you need to do is show up and open your mouth and make sure that you're having conversations with the right people in the right spaces. And it gets to be so easy. It gets to be so fun. And I'm so excited for you. And I'm so excited to read your book too.
Thank you. Well, I will get you a copy. Toot sweet.
Yes. So what's next for you? Sorry.
Oh, no, I was just saying, then you can start having bigger conversations with your friends about friendship and frenemies and, you know, that whole complex storyline of how we've evolved in our friendships, I think, which is a really cool conversation too.
Yeah, definitely. And I feel,
but yeah, I mean, but what's next is this, the Better Friends Club. I'm working on evolving these conversations I've been having with grown women about their experiences into a forum for us to all get together to do it together instead of just one-on-one with me. And I feel like there's going to be some transformation and healing for everyone coming from those conversations, because even a lot of the grown women that I'm talking to, they still feel like it only happened to me. You know, they get that there are other people that probably were bullied, but the feeling of it, that like raw kind of like hole that's like burning that wound in your heart, it feels very uniquely yours. And I feel like this is a really great time to alchemize it and to almost like share it with other people and have us all just kind of like work our magic in it and like dispel it and like create stardust from it or something, and just put it out there and just have it be gone so that we can move on. And so I'm really into facilitating that and creating it and seeing what comes from it, because it's a conversation that I really want to be in. So.
Amazing. It sounds like such incredible work. And for anyone who's listening who this is really resonating with, how and where can they find out more about you and your work?
Well, the best place is to go to my website, which is butterfliesbullies.com, or they can follow me on Instagram at Dalton_Jen. And all the info will be right there for everyone to connect with. And I'll be recording the audio of my book in April, which I'm really excited about too, just to read my own story, which I have a feeling is going to peel back some more onion layers, especially because I'm going to record it in my hometown where the story is set. So.
Wow. Amazing. Thank you so much for coming and sharing your story with us today, Jen. And thank you everyone for watching.
Thanks so much, Sarah.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
For more inspirational content, head over to my website withsarahmac.com, and please support the show by liking, commenting, and subscribing.